بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهده الله فلا مضل ومن يضلل فلا هادي وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له عز وجل وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعصهما فإن لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا أما بعد فقال له تعالى في القرآن الكريم في سورة الأعراف بسم الله إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يغشي الليل النهار يطلبوه حثيثا والشمس والقمر والنجم مسخرات بأمره ألا له الخلق والأمر تبارك الله رب العالمين وصدق الله العظيم بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الكريم ونفعني وإياكم بالذكر الحكيم إنه هو جواد الرؤوف الرحيم. الآن حي الترجمة. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan, from Shaitan, the accursed devil. In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise is due to Allah. All gratitude is due to Allah. I seek His help and beg His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the mischief and the evils of our souls. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none who can lead that person astray. And whomsoever Allah finds in error, there is none to guide them. I bear witness that there is no God, no deity existing and therefore worthy of worship, except Almighty Allah, glory be to Him, who is one, alone, unique, without partner or associate. And I bear witness further that Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is Allah's servant, messenger, and apostle. And He, Allah, has sent His messenger in truth and with the truth as a bearer of glad tidings, and also as a warner in advance of the hour of judgment. Therefore, whomsoever obeys Allah and His messenger, surely that person is rightly guided, and whomsoever disobeys the two of them, surely that person harms only his or her own soul. And they harm not Allah the slightest little bit, as for what follows. For Allah, glory be to Him, has said in the Quran, the 54th ayah or verse of the 7th surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Araf, or the Heights. Surely your Rabb is Allah. Your Lord is Allah, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then established Himself on the throne in a manner that suits His majesty. He makes the night cover the day and the day follow the night in rapid succession. He created the sun, the moon, and the stars, and made them subservient to His will. His is the creation, and His is the command. Blessed be Allah, the Lord of the worlds, and surely Allah has spoken the truth. O you who worship Allah. Many decades ago, and I believe it was the year 1922, a vast gathering occurred right here in Hall. And the gathering was convened and attended by the followers of a great leader of that time, the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And this meeting was a gathering of oppressed people of African descent here in America. And over a couple of days' time, they sat in many sessions, taking up matters, discussing matters, analyzing matters that had to do with how they, as a people, should conduct themselves in order to free themselves from oppression. And these black folk who gathered, they were of different political orientations. They were of different backgrounds. Some of them were from the north, some of them were from the south, some of them were from out west. And they were of different religions also. Amongst this diverse gathering of Americans of African descent, there were many Muslims. And in a workshop or seminar entitled something like Religion and the Future of the Negro, the Muslims amongst the members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, they began to push a resolution for all black people in America to adopt Islam as their religious way of life. As you can imagine, this generated a great deal of discussion. So much so that the session, which was originally planned to be a morning session, ended up stretching out the entire day. And in the afternoon, Marcus Garvey himself, Marcus Garvey, a leader who organized some 9 million people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere, largest organization of black people since we've been in the Western Hemisphere, during a time when there was no cell phones, no social media, none of that. Organized 9 million people. And this session took on such grave importance that in the afternoon, Garvey himself came into the session and assumed chairmanship of that gathering. By the end of the day, those in the huge gathering decided that in the ranks of the UNIA, that there would be no one religion, no one religious way of life that they would advocate for all black folk. Undoubtedly, this was because of the reality of the African continent itself, which is extremely diverse in religious expression and adherence. However, they said, the UNIA would become a strong advocate for people of African descent to adapt a scientific understanding and a scientific practice of whatever religion they claim. Oh, you who believe. As people in the West, not by choice, but by compulsion, and also those who are people in the West, Muslims in the West, by choice. We are subject to a view of the creation that is not consistent with the teachings of Al-Islam. And that view of creation is one that separates religious and spiritual belief from science. And this is a reflection, actually, of the medieval European roots of the established society. The one time you study the history of Europe, before they advanced to a higher understanding, the church, which was the predominant religious institution, had some very unscientific views. And they advocated for a separation of religion and science, just as they advocated ultimately for a separation of church and state. This is history. However, the separation of science and religion is in fact inconsistent with the Islamic perspective on the creation. Because science, the science of man, is an attempt on man's part to understand the creation brought into existence by Allah. So that when we look at the sciences of man, we see that man is not responsible, and when I say man, I mean the human being, is not responsible for creating anything in Allah's universe. What we do is we study that which Allah has created and then utilize the understanding that we gain from that study to advance our lives as a species. So when you go to school and you're studying, you take up all the sciences, all of which end with ology, O-L-O-G-Y, biology, geology, etc. All those are studied. Biology, study of living things. Not creation of living things, study of living things. Geology, study of the earth, and so forth and so on. Man doesn't create stars. Man, the human being, studies the stars that Allah has created. Why do I point this out? I point this out because amongst the provisions that Allah has given the human being to sustain himself and to further his existence as part of the creation, amongst those provisions is scientific understanding. And so as intelligent people in the West, as Muslims who must, as a matter of self-preservation, seek to thrive, seek to progress, we must strive, as the people in 1922 advocated, for a scientific understanding of the universe. In the ayah that I read, I want to go back. Allah, glory be to him, he describes himself and says, Inna Rabbukumullah. Surely your Lord, your Rabb, is Allah. And later on in the same verse, he describes himself as Rabbul Alameen, the Rabb of the creation, of the khalq, of the universe, and everything in it. And one day, decades ago, those of us who were students of Sheikh Allama Tawfiq Rahmatullah alayhi, our founding Imam, we were reviewing with him the 99 most beautiful names of Allah. And amongst the Asma'ul Husna is the divine attribute, a characteristic of Allah, Ar-Rabb. Ar-Rabb. And the Sheikh Allama, he said to us that the attribute of Allah, the divine name of Allah, Ar-Rabb, contains within its meaning 3 other attributes and divine names and divine characteristics of Allah. Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, and Al-Musawwir. The creator, the maker, and the fashioner. Allah describes himself as the creator, the maker, the fashioner, the evolver of everything that exists. And then Allah, he says, he makes the night cover the day, and the day follow the night in rapid succession. He created the sun, the moon, and the stars, and made them subservient to his will. His is the creation, and his is the command. The meaning of this is that the universe functions according to the laws that constitute the command of Allah. The universe operates scientifically, mathematically, with precision, with order, as a result of the command of Allah. Allah also describes himself as Al-Wakil. Al-Wakil. Part of the meaning of Al-Wakil is the one who manages the operation of the universe. When you go on the job, you have a manager. If you're in your home, if things are going to be run with precision and order and intelligence in your home, someone in your home must have managerial responsibility. If you're in an organization, if you're in a community, someone must have managerial responsibility over the operation of that entity, else there will be chaos. And so Allah manages the entire universe, and none has the capacity to do that except for Him. And the operation of the universe occurs according to law. It's not random. It's not coincidental. It's law. And everything in the universe must obey the command of Allah. Everything in the universe must operate, must function according to the laws that Allah has put in place for management of His khalq, management of His creation. So Shaykh Allama Tawfiq Rahmatullah alayhi, he used to give the example of a person who goes up to the roof of a building and is leaning over the side trying to see what is on the ground. If he leans too far, then a law created by Allah, which is called the law of gravity, that law will snatch him off of that roof. And it will continue to pull the falling body until it strikes the earth. And that person could be righteous or unrighteous. That person could be rich or poor. That person could be black or white. That person could be believing or unbelieving. It won't make a difference. Because the law of the universe is no respecter of persons, or you who believe. So I cite this, and I hope you're following me. I hope you're following what I'm trying to say, because I'm trying to get us to think differently about the scientific way of life that is called Al-Islam. And when we think about the deen of Islam, when we think about the lifestyle of the Muslim, we often think of our obedience to Allah's law as being, quote unquote, religious or spiritual, and it never occurs to us that Allah knows His creation, and Allah knows everything, and that there are laws that Allah has put in place in order that we might preserve ourselves and thrive as believers. And there's a scientific basis for it. And it's extremely important in this day and time, the day and time of the millennial generation, a day and time in which they are moving away from rituals and institutions and lifestyle that they see as being purely religious. Young people in America, young people in the West, Christian, Muslim, Jew, and other, many of them, not all of them, but too many of them are moving away from religious institutions. And there are people who study American public life, like the Pew Center, and they're conducting surveys amongst these young people, and they're asking them, do you believe in God? Response, yes, overwhelmingly. Well, why are you moving away from churches, mosques, and synagogues, but not moving away from your belief in God. These are surveys being conducted amongst young people. And these young people are providing answers like, well, we no longer have faith in the institution itself, they say. We do have faith in God. So I point this out because there's a danger in that. There's a danger in moving away from quote-unquote institutionalized religion. And that danger in moving away from institutionalized religion is it leaves the person vulnerable to taking on other kinds of narratives, other kinds of perspectives on the creation, other kinds of understandings that may in fact, and oftentimes are in fact, dangerous to them as human beings. Oh, you who worship Allah. When Allah says to us that we should eat a certain way and not eat a certain way, there is a divine science behind that. When Allah tells us that we should behave a certain way and not behave a certain way, there is divine science behind that. Not just science, divine science. The science that is in the realm of the creation of Allah and the command of Allah. When Allah tells us to dress a certain way and don't dress a certain way, socialize a certain way and don't socialize a certain way, worship a certain way and don't worship a certain way, it is because in His supreme knowledge, He knows what we don't know. Let me give you an example. So a few months ago, I was in a meeting. In fact, the meeting was here in Harlem. And the meeting was a gathering of people who do AIDS, HIV/AIDS, prevention and education. I do that. I've been doing it for decades. So during one of the discussions, I noticed certain people in the room making statements that indicated a hostility towards institutionalized religion. Specifically, institutionalized religion in the church. And they hesitated to say the mosque, but you got what they were saying. And they were expressing a hostility towards institutionalized religion because of the opposition to the LGBTQ lifestyle. If a church is really following the law that's supposed to be the foundation of the church, if the synagogue is really following the law, Allah governs the universe by law. If the synagogue is conducting itself according to the law of the Torah, the Christians, the law of the gospel, not the faith, the law. If the Muslims are governing themselves by the law of Al-Islam, Quran and Sunnah, then those faith groups will express and will take a position that is in opposition to the normalized LGBTQ lifestyle. And so I noticed that there were people who were kind of, expressing this hostility because they felt that the religious institutions were hostile to their lifestyle. So I let it go on for a while. And then I raised my hand and I asked the room. Now remember, this is a room of AIDS educators. So I asked the room, what is the number one top at-risk population for HIV/AIDS? Room went quiet for a minute. And their quietude was instructive to me because they knew the answer. I knew the answer. In fact, really, we were watching a slide presentation. The answer was right up on the board a few minutes ago. Answer, number one at-risk population, men having sex with men. That's from the beginning of HIV/AIDS up till now, decades later, and millions and millions of dollars and millions of deaths. Number one at-risk population is men having sex with men. And no one who's involved in AIDS education will deny that. So I said to the room, perhaps the divine prohibitions against same-sex intercourse are reflective of an understanding that Almighty God has of His creation that human beings don't have. In other words, I was encouraging them, maybe y'all need to think a little more scientifically about this. I know you have biases against religion, but perhaps the religious law is based on scientific principle, and that Allah would know when He created us, again, what kind of sex is good for us and what kind of sex is not. Yet that is the last thing you will hear. I was watching a commercial the other day, and I've noticed that now the commercials for HIV, understandably, they communicate a scientific message. However, I notice a subtlety mixed in with the scientific message. And the subtlety is to say, well, you know, be happy with who you are. Be happy with what you do. Celebrate your life. Just make sure you take these scientific measures, take this medicine, etc. Or you'll worship Allah. So there are many examples of this principle. And I'm saying to you that perhaps when we study the Quran, when we study the scriptures revealed before the Quran, and we read, for instance, of the teachings and the examples and the advocacy of the prophets and messengers of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all. Perhaps we should expand our understanding to understand that when the prophets and messengers of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, were advocating for the obedience to certain laws of Allah, and were advocating for a certain way of life, based upon a certain understanding of the creation. What kind of prophetic understanding? Prophetic teaching, based in the revelation of Allah. Perhaps there's a scientific reason for that. And when we obey the law of Allah, or when we obey the law of Allah, then we benefit from Allah's infinite knowledge of His creation, whether we understand it or not. Whether you have an elementary school understanding of the religion or a PhD understanding of the religion. If you are obedient to Allah and you make your prayers, you fast, you treat people the way you're supposed to be, you would want to be treated yourself, then you're going to get the barakah for that. You're going to get the blessing for that. Regardless of whether you have an elementary or an advanced understanding of the religion of Allah, if you obey Allah's law of zakah, and obey Allah's law of sadaqah, and obey Allah's law of ibadah, of worship, you're gonna get the benefit for that. And perhaps when we read of the exploits of the prophets and the messengers of Allah, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon them, all of them, perhaps what we are actually reading is a narrative that describes the struggle between the lower and the higher understanding of man. A struggle between an unscientific and a scientific way of living. Unscientific way of living. Living, an understanding of Allah is an understanding of living, or a basis for living that's just based on feelings. They're just based on emotions. Nothing scientific about feelings and emotions. We sit down to eat, and we're not concerned with the science of eating. We're only concerned with whether or not this tastes good. Or before you open your mouth to speak, rather than weigh the science of speech. Speech is a gift from Allah. Rather than weigh the science of speech and the powerful impact of our words, we just open our mouth and let anything come out. Before we become involved intimately with a sexual partner, and you know, sexual intercourse is not just physical. It's just not a matter of chemistry and feelings. Sexual intercourse is physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's psychological. And when you're sexually intimate with someone, all of those factors, all of those dimensions of the human being come into play. So we have been guided by Allah to a way of life that says to us, exercise caution. Exercise caution before you become sexually intimate with someone. And if you're going to become sexually intimate with them, make sure it's under this, that, and the other set of scientific conditions defined by Allah, subhanallah wa bihamdihi. So perhaps when we read about Noah and the narratives of Noah, the prophet Noah, Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, that are in the Quran, in the Torah, referred to in the Injil, and the flood of the time of Noah, which knowledge of which exists in every ancient culture of humanity. Every ancient culture of humanity, regardless of whether they are of Abrahamic faith tradition or not, every ancient culture of man has knowledge or reflects in its narratives and in its teachings knowledge of the flood that occurred during the time of Noah. You don't believe it? Look it up. Look it up. So perhaps the flood in the time of Noah was not only chastisement or wrath because of the violation of moral law, but perhaps there was a scientific basis for it as well. So those of us who are familiar with the scriptures, in the scriptures it's written that after the flood, that as a manifestation of his mercy, Allah said, well, I will no longer wipe out humanity with a flood of water. That's what it said. He didn't say, I won't wipe out vast segments of the humanity with a flood of disease. He didn't say, I won't wipe out a vast segment of humanity with pestilence or with fire or anything of that nature. He just said it wouldn't be water. That's why James Baldwin wrote, "The fire next time." For those of you who know who James Baldwin was, or you who worship Allah, think about this. Think about this because we're going to, during the next few weeks, we're going to be disseminating messages here at MIB and implementing measures that are designed to be scientific responses to the threat of the coronavirus. Already amongst the Muslims, if you look online, you see people poo-pooing, discounting the gravity of the threat presented globally by this virus. I'm looking at it every day. And I say to myself, they need to shut off their computers and look around the world for real. Saudi Arabia just announced less than a week ago measures putting restrictions on Umrah. If you're over there on Umrah, you can leave. But if you're not there, they're putting restrictions on Umrah and on Hajj. They're trying to work this stuff out right now. This is serious. I received a message from a Muslim I know who lives right outside of Milan, Italy. I've known him since he was a teenager. He lives right outside of Milan, Italy. The whole area where he lives is under quarantine. And he sent me a message. Schools closed. No public events. Supermarkets empty because people rushing in, buying up water, buying up food. This is not some science fiction movie. This is a real situation. And it was pointed out to me. In fact, our board chairman, he pointed out to me. A few weeks ago, he said this to me, before it got like it is now. He said, if you go to the store, or maybe even go to your kitchen cabinet, and you pick up a can of Lysol, which is a disinfectant, if you look on the back, it mentions coronavirus. It says Lysol is effective in treating areas for the prevention of coronavirus. So when I saw that, I said to myself, what does this mean? And then I came to the conclusion, this means that the coronavirus is not new. The coronavirus is not new. What's new is the public health problem that has developed as the result of the coronavirus. And none of these reports that you are watching, if you watch the scientific report, they're not saying it's new. In fact, when I came to that conclusion, I was watching one report, and the report said that 3 years ago, China was warning about the coronavirus. 3 whole years ago. We're just hearing about it now. Now that it's taking on pandemic proportions. And I thought to myself, maybe if people had listened back then and used the type of measures that we're now being encouraged to use as a reaction, maybe if people globally had thought about the wisdom of the statement, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation now, but we are in it. And it's not going to be resolved anytime soon. Someone said, they're going to come up with a vaccine. I watched another scientist. He said, he said, conservative estimate, a year and a half. So all of the vaccine conspiracy theorists, they said, well, you know, all of this is a plot to come up with a new vaccine to knock off people. So I responded, you know, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, watch and see how many people die between now and whenever they come up with that vaccine. Islam is a religion of science and math. It's not just it's not only a religion of faith and belief, it's a religion of science and math and art and music and all of the other higher endeavors of the human being. So over the next few weeks, inshallah, by the time you come in here next week for Jumah, you're going to see those hand disinfectant dispensers on the wall. And you know, this is part of the measures that we're taking. Be mindful when you come to the masjid. It sounds like everybody's good right now, but be mindful if you sit down next to somebody and they're coughing and carrying on. Don't say, oh, well, this is the masjid and it could never happen. Yes, it could. And if the Saudi authorities have put cautions around Hajj and Umrah, then we must put cautions around just coming to the masjid in the middle of New York City, in Harlem. And this is part of the scientific understanding that we must strive for, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears and knows all things. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم بارك وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد عليه السلام والسلام وعلى آله وأصحابه وأنصاره أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وبعد. فقال الله تعالى في كتابه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لم يكن للذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة رسول من الله يتلو صحفا مطهرة فيها كتب قيمة وما تفرق الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءتهم البينة وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين حنفاء ويقيموا الصلاة ويؤتوا الزكاة وذلك دين القيمة وصدق الله العظيم. اللهم اغفر لنا مسلمين ومسلمات ومؤمنين ومؤمنات ومحسنين ومحسنات وبعد. Dear brothers and sisters, for Allah, glory be to Him, has said, in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful God. Those who are unbelievers from among the people of the book and from the polytheists were not going to desist from their unbelief until the clear proof came to them. That is, a messenger of Allah reciting to them holy scriptures from purified pages containing infallible books. Those who were given the book before this, meaning before the Quran, did not divide into sects until after there came to them a clear proof. Yet they were commanded nothing but to worship Allah with their sincere devotion to Him, being true in their faith, to establish Salah, to establish the prayer, pay the zakat, to pay the charity, obligatory charity, and that is the infallible true religion. Oh, you who believe. I want to end here. by saying that just as Allah has provided us with provision to sustain us in the earthly life, Allah has provided us with provisions to sustain us in the hereafter. And the provisions that will sustain us in the hereafter, we are given the opportunity to store them up in the here, so that when we need them in the after, they will be there. Do you all remember this old story, the old ancient story? It said the ancient story that was told by an Ethiopian wise man named Aesop. And he had a story he told. It was a story of the ant and the grasshopper. And it said that at the end of winter, as the thaw was occurring and spring was coming in, an ant emerged from out of his burrow with some grain that he had stored throughout the winter. He stored the grain before the winter, kept it in his burrow, and now that the winter had passed, he was bringing the grain out to lay it in the sun to dry it out. So as he laid out that which he had stored, a grasshopper came along. And the grasshopper was half starved to death. And he approached the ant and he said, "Hey, listen, you'll share some of that with me?" And the ant looked at the grasshopper and he said, "Well, what were you doing all last year before the winter came?" The grasshopper said, "Oh, I was very busy singing. I sang all day, I sang all night." The ant said, "And you didn't store away any provisions for yourself?" Grasshopper replied, "No, I was too busy singing." So the ant looked at the grasshopper and said, "Well, you sang all summer. Now you're going to have to dance through the winter. Store up your provisions. Store up your provisions during Hayat Dunya, during the life of this world for the hereafter." What are the provisions? They are not material things, because when you die, you won't be able to take it with you. Store up your provisions for the akhirah. What are your provisions? Your provisions are your salah. Allah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. Your prayers and your charity are provisions for the hereafter. Because we are taught in the authentic hadith of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment, that when the book of your my deeds are opened up, that the first thing that's going to be looked at, the first column in the book of deeds will be the column of the salah. And the angels are going to be counting what prayers you made, what prayers you didn't make. How many fara'id, how many fard, how many sunnahs, how many nafil, and they're going to tally all of those calculations up and throw them in the scale. Store up your provisions now for the hereafter. Your provisions for now will be your zakah. And when I say zakah, I mean zakah and sadaqah. And that which you have given for the sake of Allah will be counted for you on the Day of Judgment. So we have a hadith in Bukhari, authenticated by Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, may Allah's mercy be upon him. He said, on the Day of Judgment, the call will be ushered out from Jannah. A call will go forth from heaven, from paradise, the Prophet said. And the call would be those of you who dedicated yourself to Salah during the earthly life, enter into paradise through this door, through this gate. Those of you who dedicated yourself to giving during the earthly life, enter into paradise through the door of giving, Bible zakah. Those of you who strive and struggle with might and main for the sake of Allah during the earthly life, enter paradise through Babul Jihad, through the door or the gate of Jihad, or you who worship Allah. I remind you and I remind myself, store up your provisions in the Hayat Dunya with scientific understanding and scientific practice of your faith. And also in the Hayat Dunya, life of this world, store up your provisions for the hereafter. Because this is not only the way that Allah has created us, it is the way that Allah has created all things that exist. So we ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to have mercy on us, to forgive us, to enlighten us, to strengthen us. We ask Allah to purify us. We ask Allah to reinforce our Iman. And we ask Allah to make us aware and to make us disciplined during these perilous times. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. آمين. وأوفى